All couples fight. All of us in relationships fight. Oh my goodness. Mike never fights. Okay. You might want to help. Or, there he goes. Just hit the down arrow. There you go. Oops. And healthy couples fight clean, and unhealthy couples can fight dirty. One more. There we go.
You look upset.
I am upset.
Why are you upset?
Because I just don't understand why you're being weird.
I'm not the one who's being weird. You're being weird.
How am I being weird?
You asked for my opinion. You asked for my opinion. I gave it to you. You didn't like it.
Yeah, I didn't like it.
Then why'd you ask?
Because I didn't know that I wasn't going to like it.
You know what? I actually think I like it now.
You do?
Yeah.
But you said you didn't like it.
I didn't, but now I do.
Are you sure?
Yeah, for sure. I changed my mind.
So you definitely like it?
Yeah. I think so.
What?
I don't know.
What do you mean?
It doesn't matter.
It does to me.
I thought maybe I liked it, but maybe I don't. Okay, actually, I think I don't.
Why not?
I don't know. I just don't like it anymore.
I don't understand. What changed?
I'm just not feeling it.
What does that even mean?
Do we have to keep talking about this?
But you just said you liked it for sure, and now you don't.
I changed my mind.
Well, change it back. I don't like it when we fight.
I don't like it either.
I'm sorry.
Babe. I'm so glad you said that. Thank you. You have my complete forgiveness.
All right, yeah, don't tell somebody you don't like it, I guess. I don't know. When our relationships are healthy, we work for resolution. We try to make things work out. We don't like to fight. Yet conflict, you know, when we're in a relationship, even, you know, just friendship, or with your parents, or with your siblings, or with your kids, you know, if it's a healthy relationship, we try to resolve conflict. We try not to run away from it. But most of us, like I said, hate confrontation. We don't like to fight. Yet we fall into some bad habits early on. And sometimes those play out the older we get, and especially if we get into a close relationship, and many times in a marriage relationship. Those old habits that we learned come out and start taking over. When I was a kid, I was a runner. When there was confrontation in our house and I was uncomfortable, I would just take off. You know, we lived 8 miles from town. There was no place to go. But I would take off to the fields, and one of my times I ran away, I'm not sure how I ended up there, and I'm still not exactly sure where I was. I just remember it. But I'm pretty sure I was at the neighbors across 2 fields, and I get out in the clearing through these cornfields and get out into in this clearing, and here are a bunch of farmers standing there talking. And my grandfather was there, and he lived on the farm with us. It was not I got taken home. I got a sore bottom for running away. And so after that, I never ran away quite so far. I would just stay on the section that we lived on, or the 80 acres, and wander the fields until I felt safe or felt like I was in control more so. I mean, I was a kid. And I did that till I got a car, I think. So when things were hard at home, I would just take off. And I would be in the fields and I would talk to God, I would run, I would cry, I would sing, I would do a lot of different things. And that's kind of how I handled stuff. I didn't want to stay and try to fix it. And after that, to get away, like I said, I stayed on the land. As I got older, I started becoming a screamer too. I hated that. I never wanted to be a screamer. And one day my dad said, "You're starting to sound a lot like, and you're screaming too much." And I thought I never wanted to hear I was a screamer. So that really shocked me. And it really woke me up. And I don't think I've become one of those yet. I mean, there are times, but not that often. When we're fighting dirty, someone thinks they have to win. Most often, they believe they must win in every confrontation. And that could mean yelling. That can mean physical abuse. That can mean whatever it takes to make sure you're right when it's over. Often, with those kind of confrontation, the other person tends to close themselves off. And they tend to back away, and they tend to put it and bottle it up in the inside. Healthy and unhealthy fighting affect each of us in all of our relationships. Our relationships in our home, with our spouse, with our kids, with our in-laws. They can be mirrored in our relationships with our friends, with our teachers, with our coworkers. Learning how to fight fair is something we can all do better. John Gottman studied married for 16 years, and he said that he could watch a couple fight for 5 minutes, and he could determine with 91% accuracy if they would eventually divorce. It's really not about if we're going to fight. It's how we're going to do it. None of us want to live with somebody that's a constant nag or continually complaining. We tend to hang around people that are encouraging, positive, somebody that that isn't negative and bossy all the time. We don't want to be with that. Proverbs 27:15 says, "A quarrelsome wife is like a constant dripping on a rainy day." Someone that is always looking to disagree with you is like a drippy faucet. That constant dripping will drive you nuts. As we continue our series from this day forward, we're at week 2. Last week, we recognized that our first commitment in a great relationship is to seek God and put him first. Number 2 today is fight fair. Next week is going to be have fun. 4 is stay pure, and 5 will be never give up. The writer of James spoke about conflict in relationships. In James 1:19 and 20 says this. It says, "Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. For man's anger does not bring about the righteous life that God desires." We're going to tear these 2 verses apart, and we're going to call it God's rules for fighting fair. Number 1 is stop and listen carefully. Everyone should be quick to listen. James 1:19. Listening is an active process by which we make sense of, assess, and respond to what we hear. The listening process itself has 5 different stages. 1 is receiving. We all know we have 2 ears and 1 mouth. We need to listen. We need to receive. We must give our full attention to the one we're listening to. There is no multitasking with listening. You need to give them total. You can't listen while you're texting or scanning Facebook or reading a paper. You have to stop and listen. Our ears hear, but our mind has to receive the information. It's like when this little girl comes up to her dad and he's out there reading his paper, and she's jabbering. You know how little 4-year-olds are. They'll just go on and on and on. Boys too like to talk, and they visit. And they just keep talking. And then they'll say, "Dad, are you listening?" And Dad will go, "Mm-hmm." And Dad has no idea what he's saying. And he'll just continue to go on. And finally, this little girl goes up in her dad's lap, and she pulls the paper down. She puts her hands on both sides of his face and says, "Daddy, are you listening?" And then he has her full attention. She has his full attention. That's what we need to do. When we're receiving, we have to give our full attention to that person. And then we have to understand. We listen to understand. We're not just listening to hear it. We are listening to understand what they're saying. We have to desire to understand what they're saying, where they're coming from. We have to empathize with them as they share. Often, if you're the one speaking, it's great to use a word picture. because it helps somebody to feel your pain or to understand what you're talking about. Like if you're trying to get their attention and say, you know, honey, I feel like that squeaky door that we have that needs oil, that needs grease, that needs attention, and you just keep ignoring it. I feel like you're ignoring me like that. Now that'll help them to see what you're talking about, and it helps, and we need to understand where that person is coming from. Or you say, I don't want to nag, but I feel like I'm nagging all the time. And so that helps them to feel where you're coming from. Evaluate. As we listen, we evaluate. We try to sort out the emotional part and to get at the meat of the question, or meat at the feeling, or what's going on. Remember, as we listen, we need to remember what they're saying in order to respond in an appropriate manner. We're not supposed to be sitting there trying to figure out how to fix what they're saying. We don't need to fix it. We're trying to remember what they're saying, not necessarily coming up with a plan. Proverbs 18:2 says, a fool finds no pleasure in understanding, but delights in airing his own opinions. Sometimes we're listening and we're not really remembering because we're trying to think of how to fix it, or we're trying to tell them all that we know about the subject. That isn't what they're waiting for. When we are thinking of things to say instead of truly listening and remembering, we're belittling that person's feelings and thoughts. We have to give them 100% attention. We have to say, you know, one of the best things that we should do once we're done hearing what they're saying and remembering is repeat back to them, this is what I heard you say. And repeat it back. And that works not just with a significant other or a spouse, it works really good with your kids, teenagers, anybody that you're working with. This is what I hear you saying. Because all of us have filters, and we hear things differently than that person said. Or they thought they said it in a way that's totally different than how we heard it. So that's why we need to remember it and repeat it back to them. And then we need to respond. Put yourself in that person's situation. What would you need if you were them at that time? Do you need somebody to tell you how to fix it? Or are you just wanting them to listen and not really wanting them to fix anything? Just to be there, to be a listening board, a sounding board. When we listen, we are showing that we value that other person. Secondly, in God's rules for fighting, guard your words faithfully. The second half of James 1:19 says, be slow to speak. Doesn't mean to slow your words down. It means to be slow to give them an answer. Solomon wrote in Proverbs 21:23, watch your tongue and keep your mouth shut, and you'll stay out of trouble. Another place that says, even a fool is thought wise when he's quiet. Sometimes the best thing we can do is keep our mouth shut. But be slow to think about what to say. Respond slowly. 2 questions to ask is, should it be said? And should it be said now? Like an example in that video clip. Somebody should have found a different way to say he didn't like whatever it was that she asked him about. And maybe he shouldn't have said anything at all and have been a lot farther ahead. But we have to be, you know, sometimes there's things that, you know, if your friend asks you, hey, do I look good in that? Be careful. Or if they say, do I look fat? Don't say yes. Find a way to say it. I don't know. I mean, you have to know the person, but that's what I'm talking about is, does it need to be said? And does it need to be said now? If they're vulnerable, if they're really feeling like something's wrong, obviously don't dump more on them. Give them some time. Think about it. Some never rules in responding is never call somebody a name. Never.
Come on, honey. We've always talked things out in the past. Don't give me this silent treatment. You realize it's been hours since you said one word to me?
Oh, you want one word? I'll give you one word. Chicken.
Oh, come on.
Chicken, chicken, chicken!
Gloria!
Yeah!
You're acting childish.
No, you are. You don't even have the guts to be with your own wife when she's having your baby. You just wanted all the fun, huh? Hit and run. But when the chips are down and I need you there, where are you? Nowhere.
I was better off with the silent treatment. Gloria, try to put yourself in my place.
No, you put yourself in my place. Now, what if you were having the baby and you'd planned on me being there and then I backed out on you? What would you think of me?
I think you were a chicken like me. Lori, just because I don't want to be in the room with you doesn't mean I don't want the baby. I want the baby.
Oh, you want a baby? Okay, chicken. Here's an egg. Go hatch one.
Don't call each other names. That's not a good idea. An argument will quickly escalate if you're starting to attack each other with names. Never raise your voice. Proverbs 15:1 says, a gentle answer deflects anger, but harsh words make tempers flare. Being louder never made you any more right than before. Try always to answer in an even, quiet voice. It doesn't always diffuse a situation, but it'll probably help. Never get historical. Don't bring up past fights, past arguments, past grievances. No one needs to hear what we already did. We already know what we already did. Work on the disagreement in front of you. If it's an ongoing problem, it might be time to seek some professional help. You know, and this, like I said, this isn't just for marriage partners. This works great with your kids too. Don't be historical. Don't bring up all their past stuff. Just work with the situation today. They already know everything, all that's past. But like I said, if it's an ongoing problem, get some help. See a counselor. Talk to your pastor. Work through it together. Never say never or always. Don't say, you never put the gas in the car, or you always insult my mother. Don't say things like that. In fact, try to don't even use the you word. Talk about yourself. I feel. Use the statements that share your feelings, where you're coming from. Don't attack the other person. Never threaten divorce. Don't let divorce be an option. When you're married, it was until death. Or in an unmarried situation, with your friends, don't say, I'm not going to be your friend anymore. I hate you. I never want to see you again. Those kind of things, they don't help relationships. And if you want to be friends, and if you're doing the right thing, if it's a healthy relationship, work it through. Try to figure it out. Sometimes you'll have to agree to disagree. And never quote your pastor during a fight or anybody else. Don't say, my parents did it like this, or their kids do this. Don't compare somebody to somebody else. Don't hold anyone else up as an example of what is right or wrong. Only deal with the situation you're in currently. Don't say, my daddy said it would turn out like this, or why can't you be more like my mother? Deal with your own situation right where you are. Don't compare. The only standard we have as believers is Jesus Christ. That's the only person you can ever compare any of these things to. All right, next God rule. Handle your anger righteously. James 1:19 says, everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. Ephesians 4:26 and 27 says, in your anger, do not sin. Do not let the sun go down while you are still angry, and do not give the devil a foothold. God says to be slow to become angry. Anger in and of itself isn't sinful. But when our anger is against our spouse and not the situation, it is misplaced. When our anger is because of our own hurt feelings or our own wants and desires, harboring anger about it will be sinful. When we're angry over the right reasons, and the right reasons are things that make God angry. God hates sin. God doesn't like it when people are mistreated. That makes him angry. Those are the things that we can be angry about, that when they involve justice for somebody else and mercy. That's what we need to be sticking up for. We need to be, righteously angry about. But we still need to work through those situations and resolve them as quickly as we can. We don't want it to smolder and become a burr under our saddle. We don't want it to continue to bother us and to start making us ornery and angry and frustrated. And then we'll take it out on somebody else. And that obviously is a sin when you're hurting somebody else because of your anger. It's a great rule of thumb is to never go to bed angry. There have been times when I've went to bed angry because a lot of times it's because my husband didn't even know I was upset because I didn't evidently tell him very clearly that I was upset about a situation. And I'd lay there in bed getting upset about it. And he'd be snoring. He used to snore more. He snored away, and I thought, how can he sleep? mostly because he didn't know what was going on, or just pure exhaustion. But sometimes, to try to resolve that situation and work it out, and there's a lot of things we can say. It's hard, and I know how difficult it can be to say, well, let's take time to talk about this later. And a lot of times when you're upset about something, it's hard to do that. I know with our teens, it was very difficult to do that. It still gets to be a little difficult to do that. But to talk to a young adult and to get to one of your kids and you're angry, it's easy to just let it fly and to try to get it out. And so it's good then to step back and say, hey, we've got something we need to talk about, and to set aside a time to do it. Now, I know some kids that would bother. They would have a hard time sleeping that night if they decided to wait till tomorrow to talk about it. But a lot of times, if you're tired, and if the other person is tired, trying to talk about it before you go to bed can be a very terrible thing to do, because then there'll be just tempers will fly more. But a lot of times with a young person, that might be the only time, because you just got to work out what works the best. One of our kids, he'd come home from work at about, 10 or 11. That was when he talked. I was thinking I was waiting up for him so I could say goodnight. And then I was up for another hour at least, or two, and he would just keep going. And that was fine. That was the way he did things. A lot of times if you can get a teenager in a car, they don't have to look at you then, and you can talk on the way to and from the mall or to go out to eat or whatever you're going to do. But take some time then to maybe bring up the subject. Turn off the radio, try to do some talking. That way they don't have to look at you. They can just maybe spill whatever is bothering them. So now that now we find that our grown children seems to be the best time that they talk is when they're driving. They call us a couple of our sons call us all the time when they're on the road between Susan City and Sacramento, or between wherever the other one lives in his house. And they're always calling then. And that's when, but if it's something that's going to be distracting, or if it's something that they need to really talk to their dad about, they will set aside a time later to finish that discussion. So when we're upset as a married couple, if you've ever noticed, you tend to sleep back to back when you're not happy with that other person. You tend to give them the backside. If you're going to go to bed that way, make sure it's not because there's some unresolved conflict brewing. Now, if you're wondering if you're fighting fair, if you're wondering if what you're doing is right or wrong, here's 4 signs that you aren't fighting fair. 1, you're criticizing. Criticism is not a spiritual gift. It isn't something that you're given that you can be really good at. Criticism is when you'll say something like, you never remember anything. You can't be counted on for your word. Often when somebody that criticizes somebody else, they're blaming someone else for their own shortcomings. A complaint is when you say, hey, when I got the car today, there wasn't any gas in it. Could you kind of keep an eye on that when the next time you borrow the vehicle to put some gas in it? Because you said you would. You said you'd keep the gas in the car. So, that's a totally different way of saying it. So if you find yourself criticizing, try to turn that around in a different way. Nitpicking is another word for criticizing. It isn't really to help somebody else. It's to divert the issue away from whatever is really the problem. Contempt. When you're in a discussion, never show contempt for another person. Contempt is composed of a set of behaviors that communicate disgust, and it includes, but it isn't limited to, sneering, sarcasm, name-calling, eye-rolling, mockery, hostile humor, and I can't ever say that word, when you're condescending to another person. Is primarily transmitted through nonverbal behavior. Most of us that have been around kids, or anybody really at any time, have you ever experienced the eye roll? And then you're talking. Yeah, and you just, that's a sign of contempt. Don't do that to your person you're trying to resolve a problem with. Don't roll your eyes. Don't act like, hey, this isn't worth my time. Listen. Don't show contempt. It shows a lack of love and understanding for the one that you're trying to talk with. Defensiveness. Don't get defensive. Try to hold that back. Sometimes when we're trying to share something with the other person, we take it too seriously. We take it wrong. We take it wrong. When we're seeking God, we're putting Him first. The second part of that is we're putting that other person next. So try to, when you're talking, when we're fighting, a lot of times we only think about how it affects us. You are doing this to hurt me is kind of being defensive. That's the sole purpose of this argument, is so you can make me feel bad, is kind of how that comes out. And the problem isn't really me, it's all yours. And that isn't the truth. We're two people in this, we're two together, and often there's more to there's two sides to everything. You need to learn to acknowledge the things that they say that are true and work from there. On the other side of the coin, when they tell you that there's something bothering you, don't get all upset. Listen. Oftentimes they only want to help. Don't get huffy and refuse to even pay attention. That's probably the biggest thing Gary and I have had to work through. Probably because we've been married before. Neither of us wanted to hurt the other person's feelings. Neither of us wanted to argue. Neither of us wanted, and we struggled with it. We struggled with that for, first 10, 15 years. Neither of us would tell each other what was bothering us about the other person. We would just let it smolder, and we would try to ignore it. And some things are worth ignoring. Like if they never shut the cupboard door, just learn to shut the cupboard door. Don't worry about it. Don't let that be a big deal. But if there's something that's really bothering you, that's hurting your feelings, you need to share it. You need to let that person know. But then that person has to be gracious enough to listen. And so that's what you can't get defensive. A lot of times, Gary and I, our conversations will start, can I tell you something? And unfortunately, I always get my hackles up a little bit, and then I say, yeah. And I shouldn't do that, but it still happens because we don't want to be hurting each other, and we don't like to be corrected, most of us. There are times when we struggle to share something that's really bothering us, and that's, a lot of times that's what's best for each other. And it works, and it's helped a lot that we've learned how to do it. Number 4 is stonewalling. Conflict, particularly in close relationships, can be overwhelming and feel unbearable. When faced with a potential conflict, one partner may stonewall or completely refuse to communicate. Stonewalling can include avoiding a discussion of one's feelings, refusing to give a nonverbal communication cues, walking out in the middle of the discussion, that's a pretty big clue right there, or simply refusing to discuss the issue at hand. Even putting it off. Oh, we'll talk about this another time, but they never do. Stonewalling occurs on a continuum. It can range from just really minor, let's just skip this for a while, to never, ever discussing that again. And it's more than just giving them time to cool down. It's somebody avoiding the topic altogether. Sometimes you'll see them, they'll be angry and stomp off, or they'll turn on the TV, or they'll just plain ignore you. The biggest problem and challenges with this is that it's never brought up again. According to some statistics, 85% of, who do you think is most guilty? Men or women? Men. 85% of men, that's how they handle situations. They walk off. They stonewall. They don't want to deal with it. We're afraid of alienating anyone, so we pretend everything is okay. And you get responses like, I'll take care of it, but nothing happens, or don't worry about it, it'll be okay, or just, I don't want to talk about it. Leave me alone. That's when we see that, you're stonewalling. You're not handling this disagreement very well. You're not fighting fair. Satan loves when we fight against each other. His mission is to destroy families. That's his mission. He loves it when we're at odds with another person, especially a family member or a Christian brother or sister. Divisiveness is one of Satan's best weapons. That's what he uses to destroy us. God designed us to be in relationships, and he knew we wouldn't always agree, but he gave us the tools to fight fair. Romans 12:21 says, don't let evil conquer you, but conquer evil by doing good. Err on the side of loving that person that you're upset with. Be ready to listen more than you talk. Be okay with being wrong. Don't fight against each other. Fight against the enemy. Fight against that one that wants to destroy your relationship. Don't lose hope. With Christ, all things are possible. Philippians 4:13 says, I can do everything through Christ who gives me strength. That means with Christ, any marriage can be healed. With Christ, there is hope for your relationships. With your best friend, with your parents, with your spouse. Don't react in emotion. Respond in the Spirit. Romans 12:21 says, don't be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. When we feel strongly about something, there's emotion involved. We get emotional. Some of us get more emotional than others. The more we love and care about another person, in the conflict, that emotion's going to leak out no matter what you do, and that's a good thing. They need to know you're emotional. But we also, Jesus said, we're to mourn with those who mourn. We're to, to have fun. We're to have joy and celebrate. But we aren't to let those emotions control us and rule over us. We are to overcome evil with good. Remember how much God loves you. Remember how much He has forgiven you. And then extend that same kind of love and forgiveness to that other person. Jesus turned the other cheek, and He forgave His enemies. He has forgiven us. Confront to heal, not to win. Finally, all of you live in harmony with one another. Be sympathetic, love as brothers, be compassionate and humble. Do not repay evil with evil or insult with insult, but with blessing, because to this you were called, so that you may inherit a blessing. When we do confront, do it in love. Speak the truth in love. Don't go out of your way to bring up a problem, but plan to address troubled areas during non-conflict times. Ask somebody, what do I do that blesses you the most? What could I do better? When you're in a relationship, you're both in this together. You're not alone. If we seek God first, He is there in the middle. He has a plan for us to work it through. Forgive and apologize. Always be ready to forgive, and it's okay to be the first one to apologize. Paul wrote to the Colossians, since God chose you to be holy people He loves, you must clothe yourselves with tender-hearted mercy, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Make allowance for each other's faults and forgive anyone who offends you. Remember, the Lord forgave you, so you must forgive others. Above all, clothe yourselves with love, which binds us all together in perfect harmony. In that passage, there's no right or wrong. It says to forgive, be holy, clothe yourselves with mercy, kindness, humility, forgive each other's faults. Because think of all that Christ has forgiven us. All the times that we have slighted Him, all the times that we have not put Him in first place, all the times that something else was more important than He was, all the times that we've turned our backs on Him. And He still forgives us. All we have to do is come to Him and apologize and confess our sins, and He says He is faithful and just and will forgive us our sins. As believers, we are called to forgive, to apologize, and God said He'll take care of the rest. In marriage, in the church, in a family, you're on the same team. You and your spouse are on the same team. You married one another with dreams of facing the world together. Don't forget it. Philippians 2:4 says, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of others. That's for all relationships. Value others above yourself. Love God, love others. That's the key to fighting fair.